Before you fall asleep tonight, let me tell you something quietly unsettling. The human body is not as predictable as we like to believe. Most nights, it does what it's told. It sleeps, it rests, it repairs itself in silence. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the body forgets how to sleep, or forgets how to wake up. Sometimes it creates music where there is no sound, memories that never fade, sensations that never stop. There are people who sleep for months at a time, others who never sleep at all. Some wake up speaking with voices that no longer sound like their own. Some cry crystals instead of tears. Some carry secrets inside their bodies for decades without knowing. These are not stories from myths or folklore. They are real cases, documented, observed, still unexplained. Doctors have given them names. Science has proposed theories, but many of the answers remain missing. Why does one brain remember everything, while another forgets how to form memory at all? Why does stress make some people sweat blood, while others feel nothing? Why can beauty cause collapse? Why can laughter spread like a disease? Why can the body protect itself in ways no one taught it to? Tonight, you'll hear stories about sleep, memory, sensation, identity, and silence. Stories that blur the line between biology and mystery. Stories where the body does something it was never supposed to do, and does it anyway. You don't need to solve them. You don't need to stay awake. Just listen. Let the questions linger. Let the explanations fade. And let the mystery carry you, slowly, into sleep. The sleeping beauty of Klein 11. Imagine lying down to sleep and not waking up for weeks, not dreaming, not resting, simply gone. For people with Klein 11 syndrome, sleep doesn't arrive gently. It takes over. One moment they are awake, living ordinary lives, and the next they vanish into an overwhelming slumber that can last for weeks, sometimes months. During these episodes, they sleep up to 20 hours a day, waking only briefly, just long enough to eat, drink, or stumble through a few confused moments, before sinking back into darkness. One of the most documented cases involved a young woman whose life seemed to switch off without warning. When she woke during these episodes, she wasn't herself. Her thoughts were foggy, her emotions unfiltered. She ate compulsively, spoke strangely, and behaved in ways she would later have no memory of. Friends and family described it as watching someone half awake, trapped somewhere between dreaming and reality. And then, just as mysteriously as it began, it would end. She would wake up one morning completely normal, clear-headed, calm, embarrassed by stories she couldn't remember. Weeks of her life simply missing. No warning signs, no lingering damage, just blank space where time should have been. Doctors still don't know what causes the brain to shut itself down like this. Some believe it's triggered by infections. Others suspect inflammation deep within the brain. But no scan, no test, and no treatment has ever fully explained why the mind suddenly decides to disappear and then quietly return. The most unsettling part isn't the sleeping itself. It's knowing that at any moment your life could pause and continue without you. 2. Exploding head syndrome. Imagine you're just about to fall asleep. Your body is heavy. Your thoughts are fading. The world is becoming quiet. And then something explodes inside your head. People who experience this condition describe it as the loudest sound they've ever heard. A gunshot, a cymbal crashing, a sudden blast so violent it feels impossible that it came from within. One woman said it was like a bomb detonating behind her eyes, accompanied by a blinding flash of light and the certainty that something inside her brain had just broken. But when the moment passes, nothing is wrong. There is no pain, no injury, no damage at all. The room is silent. The body is intact. Only the memory of the sound lingers, echoing in the dark. This phenomenon, known as exploding head syndrome, tends to strike at the fragile edge between waking and sleep, when the brain is shutting itself down for the night or slowly turning itself back on in the morning. Scientists believe that instead of fading gradually, certain neurons fire all at once, creating the illusion of an internal explosion. Why this happens remains a mystery. Some people experience it once in their lives. Others hear it night after night. And just as strangely, it can vanish without warning, never to return. The most unsettling part isn't the noise. It's realizing that in the quiet moments before sleep, the brain can create its own thunder and leave no trace behind. 3. The man who couldn't stop hiccuping. In 1922, Charles Osborne hiccuped once, then again, and again, and then he never stopped. What began during an ordinary day at work turned into a condition that would follow him for the rest of his life. After a sudden strain, something deep inside his body changed. Doctors later believed a tiny area in his brainstem, the part responsible for suppressing hiccups, had been damaged. From that moment on, his body fell into a rhythm it could not escape. For 68 years, Charles hiccuped continuously. At the beginning, it happened up to 40 times every minute, each spasm interrupting his breath, his speech, his silence. Over time, the hiccups softened, becoming less violent, but they never disappeared. They simply became part of the background of his life. And yet, somehow, he carried on. He married, he worked, he spoke, laughed, and slept with that quiet, relentless interruption always present. Doctors tried everything they could think of: medications, techniques, treatments. Nothing worked. The hiccups refused to release him. Then, 1 year before his death, they stopped. No explanation, no warning. After nearly 7 decades of sound, there was suddenly silence. The rhythm that had defined his life simply faded away, leaving behind a mystery no one could solve. Sometimes the body holds on longer than it should, and sometimes it lets go when no one is watching. 4. The boy who never felt pain. Crowds gathered to watch him do the impossible. A young boy stepped barefoot across burning coals. He pressed knives into his skin. He leapt from heights that made onlookers turn away. And he never flinched. The boy felt no pain at all. Not a flicker, not a warning. A rare genetic mutation had silenced the nerves that tell the body something is wrong. To those watching, it looked like a superpower, an immunity that made him fearless, untouchable. But pain exists for a reason. It teaches us where the limits are. It tells us when to stop. Scientists later discovered that while the boy could feel pressure and temperature, the sensation of pain itself simply never reached his brain. Fire felt warm. Impact felt dull. Injury came without alarm. Over time, wounds accumulated quietly. Bones fractured without protest. Damage went unnoticed, untreated. And at just 14 years old, his body finally failed him, hurt beyond repair without ever having cried out. The mystery wasn't how he survived without pain. It was how long he could live without it. 5. The foreign accent syndrome. She went to sleep with a migraine. The kind that blurs the edges of the world. The kind that makes light feel heavy and sound feel distant. When the pain finally faded and she opened her eyes the next morning, she felt relieved. Until she spoke, her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. Friends stared. Family went silent. Her words carried an unfamiliar rhythm, a melody she had never learned. To those listening, it sounded like a Chinese accent, yet she had never been to China, never studied the language, never been exposed to it beyond everyday life. Doctors eventually gave it a name: foreign accent syndrome. Despite how it sounds, the person isn't speaking a new language. Nothing about their vocabulary changes. Instead, something deep in the brain subtly alters timing, stress, and pronunciation. Consonants soften, vowels stretch. Speech takes on a shape that listeners interpret as foreign. The strangest part is that the accent often doesn't belong to any real dialect. It's not truly Chinese, or French, or German. It's what the brain imagines those accents sound like. A kind of imitation created without intention or control. In a single night, her identity shifted. Not her thoughts, not her memories, just the sound of who she was. And once the brain had changed its rhythm, it didn't always remember how to change it back. 6. The man allergic to gravity. For most people, standing up is effortless. For him, it was dangerous. The moment he tried to rise, his world tilted. His heart began to race. Blood pressure collapsed without warning, and darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. If he stayed upright for more than a few moments, he would faint. Doctors eventually called it orthostatic intolerance, a condition where the body reacts to standing as if it were a threat. Normally, when we stand, the nervous system tightens blood vessels in the legs, pushing blood upward to keep the brain awake and alert. His body simply forgot to do that. Blood pooled silently in his legs. His brain was left without enough oxygen. To survive, he learned to live horizontally. He ate lying down, read lying down, spoke to friends from a bed or a reclined chair. Gravity itself had become something his body could not tolerate. Despite endless tests, scans, and specialists, no one could explain why this basic function had stopped working. Some people with the condition slowly retrain their nervous systems and recover. Others never do. For him, standing was no longer a natural act. It was a risk. Seven, the water allergy. Water is supposed to be harmless, comforting, essential. For her, it was painful. The teenage girl lived with aquagenic urticaria, a condition so rare that most doctors never encounter it. Even a few drops of water on her skin caused burning hives to rise almost instantly. Showering was reduced to brief moments, 10 seconds at most, every few days, just enough to stay clean before the pain became unbearable. But it didn't stop there. Her own sweat caused her skin to sting. Tears blistered her face. Even drinking water made her throat swell, turning the most basic act of survival into a careful calculation. Crying, something most people do without thinking, became dangerous. Scientists believe the reaction isn't caused by the water itself, but by something hidden within the skin. When water touches it, that substance dissolves and triggers mast cells, flooding the body with histamines as if it were under attack. What that substance is, no one knows. Because the condition is so rare, treatments remain experimental. Creams, medications, and avoidance help only slightly. There is no cure, only management. For her, water was no longer a source of relief. It was something to fear, quietly, every day. Eight, the twin that lived inside her. For years, she lived with a quiet discomfort, a dull ache in her stomach, a sense of pressure she couldn't explain. Her abdomen slowly changed, but doctors found nothing urgent, nothing clear enough to name. It wasn't until decades later that the truth finally surfaced. During a routine examination, doctors discovered something impossible. She had absorbed her twin before birth, and that twin had never fully disappeared. Instead, it had remained inside her body, growing silently over the course of more than 30 years. Within her abdomen were traces of hair, bones, even teeth. The tissue had been nourished by her blood supply all that time, sustained without her knowledge. These rare growths, known as teratomas, originate from cells capable of becoming almost anything: skin, bone, muscle, or nerve. In her case, they had followed a path that mirrored life itself. What puzzled doctors most wasn't what they found, it was what they didn't. Her immune system had never rejected the tissue, never attacked it. For decades, her body had quietly accepted something that did not belong there, protecting it, feeding it, allowing it to exist. The mystery remains unanswered. Why did her body recognize the twin as its own? And how long can something hidden survive when it was never meant to? Nine, the laughing death. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, something strange began to happen. People started to laugh, not from joy, not from humor, but from something they couldn't control. Among the 4 people, a mysterious illness spread quietly through families. It began gently, subtle tremors, moments of confusion, sudden laughter that made no sense. Over time, the laughter grew constant. Coordination faded. Walking became difficult. Speech dissolved into sounds that no longer followed thought. And then, they died. The disease came to be known as kuru, or the laughing death. For years, no one understood how it spread. There were no fevers, no wounds, no signs of infection. The most unsettling part was its patience. Some people showed symptoms decades after they were first exposed, living normal lives until the illness suddenly surfaced. Eventually, researchers uncovered the source. During traditional funeral rituals, families honored their dead by consuming small portions of the body, an act of respect and remembrance. Those who prepared the bodies, most often women and children, were the ones most affected. The cause wasn't bacteria or a virus. It was prions, misfolded proteins that quietly transformed healthy proteins into lethal copies, slowly destroying the brain from within. What made kuru so terrifying wasn't just how it killed, it was how long it waited. A memory passed from one generation to the next that took years to wake up. 10. The man who couldn't form new memories. In 1953, Henry Molaison agreed to a surgery that was meant to give him his life back. He suffered from severe epilepsy, and doctors believed that removing a small part of his brain, the hippocampus, might stop the seizures. The operation worked. The seizures faded, but time itself broke. From that day on, Henry lived forever in the present. He could remember his childhood clearly, his home, his parents, the world as it was before the surgery, but he could no longer form new long-term memories. Every morning, he woke up believing it was still 1953. He read the same magazines again and again, each time with fresh curiosity. He met the same doctors every day, greeting them as strangers. Conversations vanished the moment they ended, like words written on water. And yet, something strange remained. Although Henry couldn't remember learning anything new, he could still learn. He improved at puzzles. He developed new motor skills. His hands remembered what his mind could not. Somewhere in his brain, learning continued, silently, without awareness. His case transformed science. It revealed that memory is not a single thing, but many systems working in parallel, some conscious, some hidden. The hippocampus, it turned out, was essential for turning moments into lasting memories. But even now, the deeper mystery remains. How does a fleeting moment become a permanent memory? And where does it go when it's finally stored? Henry lived without a future he could remember, but his life gave the world a glimpse into how memory and time itself really works. 11. The Girl Who Cried Blood. In 2009, a teenage girl in Tennessee noticed something strange when she wiped her eyes. There was blood, not from an injury, not from pain, just blood mixing with her tears. The episodes began without warning. Up to 3 times a day, red streaks would form beneath her eyes, as if her tears had changed their nature. Doctors examined her carefully. They searched for cuts, infections, tumors, clotting disorders, anything that might explain what was happening. They found nothing. Her tear ducts were completely normal. Her eyes were healthy. And yet, the blood kept appearing, tracing quiet lines down her face before vanishing as suddenly as it arrived. Over time, the bleeding spread. Her nose would drip without cause. Blood appeared along her hairline, even from unbroken skin. There were no wounds, no bruises, no clear source. After years of testing, doctors were left with only theories. One possibility was a rare condition in which blood vessels become unusually fragile, allowing blood to seep through intact tissue under stress. But no one could explain why it happened to her, or why it stopped and started on its own. As the years passed, the episodes became less frequent, but they never truly ended. The mystery remains, not just how her tears carried blood, but why her body chose to speak in that way at all. 12. The man brewing beer in his gut. At first, no one believed him. A construction worker began coming home drunk, slurring his words, unsteady on his feet, insisting he hadn't touched a single drop of alcohol. His wife thought he was hiding something. Friends were certain he was lying. Then one night, a breathalyzer told a different story. Hours after his last drink, long after alcohol should have left his system, his blood alcohol level registered 0.37%, nearly 5 times the legal limit. He was dangerously intoxicated, without drinking anything at all. Doctors eventually discovered the source wasn't a bottle. It was his body. Deep in his intestines, brewer's yeast, the same organism used to make beer, had taken over. Every time he ate bread, pasta, or sugar, the yeast fermented the carbohydrates into alcohol. His digestive system had quietly become a distillery, producing ethanol on its own. The condition, known as auto-brewery syndrome, is incredibly rare. In his case, doctors believe it developed after a course of antibiotics wiped out the normal bacteria in his gut, leaving yeast free to grow unchecked. For him, a simple meal could turn dangerous. Food became something to fear. Ordinary dinners led to confusion, blackouts, and intoxication without warning. The strangest part wasn't that his body made alcohol. It was that it did so, all by itself. 13. The Jumping Frenchman of Maine. In the remote lumber camps of the late 1800s, something strange was happening. Among a group of French-Canadian lumberjacks, the simplest sound, a shout, a sudden touch, a snapped twig, could trigger an uncontrollable reaction. Their bodies responded before their minds could intervene. They jumped violently. They screamed. They threw whatever they were holding. And sometimes they obeyed. If a command was shouted at the exact moment of the startle, the men would follow it instantly, without question or awareness. Words were repeated involuntarily. Movements happened automatically. One man, startled near the edge of a cliff, nearly jumped to his death, before others pulled him back. The phenomenon became known as the Jumping Frenchman of Maine. What puzzled researchers was not just the reaction, but its precision. The responses were immediate, exaggerated, and eerily consistent. Yet outside of the lumber camps, the condition was almost unheard of. Some scientists believed it was neurological, a disorder of the brain's startle reflex. Others suspected genetics, and some argued it was cultural, a learned behavior shaped by isolation, harsh living conditions, and constant tension in the camps. Even now, the answer remains unclear. Was it the body misfiring, or the mind adapting too well to a life spent on edge? 14. The Human Tree Man. Dedi Koswara's hands began to change slowly. At first, the skin thickened, then it darkened. Over time, rough growths spread across his palms and feet, hardening into shapes that no longer looked human. Eventually, they resembled bark, branching outward, heavy and unyielding, as if his body were turning into something else entirely. The condition was caused by an extraordinarily rare disorder called epidermodysplasia verruciformis, paired with a severe failure of the immune system. A common virus, one most people carry without ever knowing, was allowed to grow unchecked. Instead of being cleared, it took control, instructing his skin cells to multiply endlessly. The growths became massive. Some weighed more than 13 pounds. Surgeons removed them again and again, carefully cutting away the hardened layers so he could move, work, and live with some comfort. But each time they returned, slowly, patiently, as if his body were following instructions it could no longer ignore. What troubled doctors most wasn't just the severity of the condition, it was the question behind it. Why did his immune system fail so completely against a virus that most bodies defeat without effort? What quiet signal had been missed? What protection never arrived? Didi endured dozens of surgeries before his death in 2016. Through it all, his body continued its transformation, persistent, unexplained, and irreversible. Some mysteries aren't loud. They grow slowly and refuse to let go. 15. The syndrome that makes you believe you're dead. Some people wake up believing they no longer exist. They look in the mirror and feel nothing. No recognition, no connection. Just a distant awareness that the body in front of them is somehow empty. This condition is known as Cotard's delusion. Those who experience it are convinced they are dead or fading or rotting from the inside. One woman stopped eating entirely, certain that food was unnecessary for a corpse. Another insisted her organs had vanished, leaving only a shell behind. Some believe they are walking through the world after death, trapped somewhere between being alive and being gone. What makes the delusion so powerful is how real it feels. Brain scans reveal reduced activity in regions responsible for processing faces and emotions. Familiar things no longer feel familiar. Even one's own reflection can seem distant, unreal. The emotional bridge between the mind and the body quietly collapses. Cotard's delusion often appears alongside deep depression, but not everyone who is depressed experiences it, and no one knows why. In some minds, sadness transforms into the belief that existence itself has ended. The body is alive. The brain is awake. And yet, the person feels absent. It's not the fear of death that haunts them. It's the certainty that it has already happened. 16. The allergy to modern life. Some people feel sick the moment the world turns on, when Wi-Fi hums through the air, when phones vibrate nearby, when power lines stretch overhead. Their bodies react. They develop headaches that arrive without warning, a burning sensation beneath the skin, hearts that race for no clear reason, a fatigue so heavy it feels impossible to stand. For those affected by electromagnetic hypersensitivity, modern life itself becomes exhausting. To cope, some flee. They move to remote areas where signals are weak or non-existent. Others line their homes with shielding, creating makeshift Faraday cages, quiet spaces meant to block invisible waves. Inside, they finally feel relief. And yet, the mystery deepens. In controlled studies, sufferers often cannot reliably detect electromagnetic fields better than anyone else. The signals appear the same. The exposure is the same. But the symptoms remain, real, overwhelming, and life-altering. Doctors and scientists continue to debate the cause. Is it a physical sensitivity science hasn't yet identified? A powerful nocebo effect, where expectation shapes the body's response? Or an environmental trigger still hiding beyond our instruments? No one knows for certain. What is clear is this: for those who experience it, the pain is real. And in a world built on invisible signals, finding silence can feel like the only way to rest. 17. The sweating blood mystery. It began without warning. An Italian woman noticed moisture forming on her skin, along her face, her palms, just as sweat normally would. But when she wiped it away, her hands came back stained red. It was blood. There were no cuts, no broken skin, no visible wounds. And yet, under moments of intense stress, blood seeped through her intact skin as if it were sweat. The condition is known as hematohydrosis, one of the rarest phenomena in medicine. Doctors believe that during extreme anxiety, tiny blood vessels near the sweat glands can rupture. When this happens, blood mixes with sweat and emerges silently through the pores. But this explanation is incomplete. The human body endures stress every day, fear, panic, grief, and yet almost no one experiences this. Why her? Her episodes were unpredictable. They came without pattern, without control. Public places became terrifying. Simple human contact felt dangerous. The condition didn't just affect her body, it slowly isolated her from the world around her. There was no clear treatment, no reliable prevention, only observation and uncertainty. The greatest mystery wasn't how blood appeared on her skin. It was why, among countless people under pressure, her body chose to release it that way. Some reactions remain too rare to be understood, and some answers never arrive. 18. The girl allergic to everything. At first, it was just small reactions. A rash after eating, a shortness of breath after a temperature change. Nothing that clearly explained what was happening. Then her world began to shrink. The young girl was diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, a condition in which the immune system releases massive amounts of histamine without warning. Foods, emotions, heat, cold, even water could trigger a full-body reaction. Drinking became dangerous. Bathing could send her into anaphylaxis. Even crying or laughing too hard could put her life at risk. One by one, ordinary things disappeared from her life. Her list of safe foods grew shorter until only a handful remained. Pets were no longer allowed near her. Scents, fabrics, and temperature changes had to be controlled. Eventually, she lived mostly inside a carefully regulated room, quiet, clean, and isolated from the world outside. Doctors know the condition can appear suddenly, sometimes after an infection or physical trauma. But they don't know why the mast cells, the body's first responders, suddenly lose control, and they don't know how to teach them to calm down again. For her, the immune system, meant to protect her, had become unpredictable and relentless. The greatest mystery wasn't what her body reacted to, it was why it never stopped reacting at all. 19. The stone baby. For more than 60 years, she carried something she had forgotten. The woman was 92 when doctors finally discovered it. She had come in for an unrelated medical scan, expecting nothing more than routine answers. Instead, the images revealed something astonishing, something that had been with her for most of her life, a child that had turned to stone. Decades earlier, she had experienced a complicated pregnancy that ended without clear explanation. Life moved on. The pain faded. The memory softened with time. What she never knew was that the pregnancy had not fully left her body. The condition is called lithopedion, meaning stone baby. When a pregnancy occurs outside the uterus and cannot survive, the body sometimes cannot reabsorb it. Instead, as a final act of protection, the immune system encases the tissue in calcium, slowly, quietly, sealing it away to prevent infection. Over time, it hardens. For more than 6 decades, her body lived in perfect balance with this presence. No fever, no illness, no warning signs. Her immune system neither rejected it nor attacked it. It simply accepted it. Fewer than 300 cases like this have ever been recorded in medical history. And still, no one knows how the body can tolerate something so large, so foreign, for so long, without protest. Sometimes the body chooses silence, and sometimes it carries its secrets for a lifetime, waiting to be found when the time is finally right. 20. The woman who sees 99 million more colors. To most people, a pebble on the ground is simply grey. To Conchetta Antico, it is anything but. Where others see a single, quiet color, she sees layers, subtle hints of pink, traces of orange, faint washes of green shimmering just beneath the surface. The world to her is never flat. It is textured, alive with color most eyes will never notice. Conchetta is a tetrachromat. While most humans have 3 types of color receptors in their eyes, she has 4. That single difference allows her to perceive an estimated 99 million colors, compared to the roughly 1 million most people see. The mystery revealed itself quietly. During scientific tests, researchers noticed she could distinguish between colors that appeared completely identical to everyone else. Shades that blended together for others stood apart clearly for her, as if separated by invisible lines. What makes this even stranger is how rare the condition is. Tetrachromacy requires a specific genetic variation on the X chromosome, making it theoretically possible only in women. And yet, most people who carry the mutation never realize it. Their brains adapt, normalize, quiet the extra information. Conchetta's brain did not. Scientists still don't fully understand how her mind processes such an overwhelming flood of visual detail without becoming overloaded. How does she focus? How does she rest? How does she choose what to notice in a world so saturated with color? Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how much she sees, it's how much the rest of us never will. 21. The boy who never sleeps. From the moment he was born, something was different. Rhett Lamb never slept. As an infant, he didn't nap. He didn't drift off in car rides or fall asleep in his parents' arms. Nights passed without rest, not from crying or discomfort, but from wakefulness. His eyes stayed open, alert, aware. As he grew older, doctors discovered a rare brain condition called Chiari malformation, where brain tissue extends into the spinal canal. It explained some things, but not this. Chiari malformation does not erase the need for sleep, and yet Rhett never slept. Not once. He remained awake 24 hours a day, every day, without the consequences that should have followed. No hallucinations, no confusion, no cognitive decline. His body didn't weaken, his mind didn't fracture. He learned, focused, and lived as though rest were unnecessary. Science had no explanation. Sleep is supposed to restore us. It repairs the brain, consolidates memory, clears toxins, resets emotion. Without it, the mind is meant to unravel. But somehow, Rhett's brain found another way, an unknown process quietly compensating for everything sleep usually provides. The mystery isn't that he stayed awake. It's that his body never asked him to rest. Somewhere inside his brain, a system no one understands is doing the work of sleep without ever letting him close his eyes. 22. The musical hallucination disease. For some people, silence never truly arrives. In the quiet hours, especially at night, music begins to play. Not faint ringing or static, but full melodies. Choirs rising and falling, orchestras swelling. Songs unfolding exactly as they once did, except no sound is actually there. This condition is known as musical ear syndrome. Most often affecting elderly patients, it causes vivid auditory hallucinations. Structured music, complete with lyrics, harmonies, and rhythm. One woman heard Amazing Grace playing on repeat for months, every note perfectly clear. Another described a full marching band moving endlessly through her thoughts. Unlike tinnitus, this isn't noise. It's memory, precision, and form. Doctors believe the condition often appears alongside hearing loss. As the brain receives less sound from the outside world, it seems to compensate, quietly filling the silence with something familiar. Songs from childhood, hymns, music tied to emotion and identity. But the mystery remains. Why music? Why not voices, or words, or nothing at all? And why these specific songs, chosen without warning, looping endlessly as if the brain refuses to let them go? For those who experience it, the music is neither imagined nor controllable. It simply arrives, uninvited, and stays. In the stillness of night, when the world grows quiet, the mind listens to itself and begins to sing. 23. The syndrome that ages you backwards. Most people watch time move in only one direction. Wrinkles deepen, voices soften, faces slowly change. But for one man, time appeared to turn around. Over the course of several years, those who knew him began to notice something unsettling. His skin grew smoother, lines faded instead of deepening. His face subtly reshaped itself, as if guided by a quieter version of the past. Even his voice changed, lighter, unfamiliar. Muscles settled differently across his body, redistributing itself in ways no one could explain. He looked younger. This wasn't a miracle cure or a reversal of aging as science understands it. Doctors believed it was caused by a rare hormonal disturbance, possibly linked to a tumor in the pituitary gland, the part of the brain that quietly controls growth, metabolism, and time's imprint on the body. But the explanation never fully satisfied. Hormones can shift, metabolism can change, yet none of that fully explains why aging itself seemed to retreat, why years appeared to peel away rather than pile on. The transformation was so dramatic that friends no longer recognized him. Old photographs felt out of place, like images from a future that never arrived. The mystery remains unresolved. Was his body misreading time's instructions? Or was something deeper rewriting them altogether? Most bodies march forward without question. His seemed to remember how to go back. 24. The woman allergic to her husband. At first, she thought it was stress. They were newly married. Life was changing. Everything felt intense. But each time they were close, her body reacted in a way that made no sense. Her skin flushed and broke out in hives. Breathing became difficult. Panic followed, quickly turning into something far more dangerous. Doctors soon realized this wasn't anxiety, it was an allergy. The woman was diagnosed with seminal plasma hypersensitivity, a rare immune reaction to proteins found in semen. In severe cases, it can trigger full anaphylaxis. But what made her case extraordinary was its precision. She had never experienced this with anyone else. Tests confirmed it. Her immune system reacted only to her husband's seminal proteins. Not all, not most, just his. A response so specific it baffled doctors who studied it. Some women develop broad sensitivities to seminal fluid, but person-specific reactions, where the immune system targets one individual and no one else, are exceptionally rare. Desensitization therapy helped manage the symptoms, slowly teaching her body not to overreact. Yet the deeper question remains unanswered. Why did her immune system single him out? What invisible signature did it recognize as a threat? Love brought them together. Her body didn't agree. And in the quiet space between science and mystery, no one has fully explained why. 25. The unbreakable bones mystery. In a quiet corner of Connecticut, a family carries something unusual beneath their skin. Their bones are extraordinarily dense. Falls that should break arms leave nothing more than bruises. Car accidents that shatter skeletons leave them standing. Medical scans revealed the reason. In some parts of their bodies, their bone density is nearly 8 times higher than normal. The cause lies in a rare genetic variation, an alteration in the LRP5 gene. Unlike most people whose bones slowly weaken with age, theirs continue to strengthen throughout life, reinforcing themselves again and again. At first, it sounds like a gift, but doctors expected a cost. Bones that dense should be rigid, heavy, brittle. They should crowd out bone marrow, restrict movement, and cause serious complications. Yet none of that happened. Their skeletons remained flexible, functional, quietly resilient. No pain, no stiffness, no hidden damage. This is where the mystery deepens. How can bones be both stronger and more adaptable? How does the body preserve balance when nature seems to have turned the dial too far? Scientists still don't fully understand how this mutation avoids the usual trade-offs of extreme density. What they do know is this: unlocking the secret could change medicine forever. Treatments for osteoporosis, bones that grow fragile instead of strong, may one day be rewritten by what this family's bodies already know how to do. Sometimes the most extraordinary things don't announce themselves. They simply hold when everything else would break. 26. The girl who remembers everything. For most people, memories fade. Days blur together. Details soften. Time moves forward because the mind lets go. For Jill Price, nothing fades. Since the age of 14, she has remembered every single day of her life. Ask her any date, and she can tell you exactly what day of the week it was, what she wore, what she ate, the conversations she had, and what was happening in the world at that moment. The memories arrive automatically, without effort or choice. They never stop. Her mind constantly replays the past, flooding her awareness with moments both ordinary and painful. While others forget to heal, Jill remembers everything. Arguments, heartbreaks, small embarrassments, grief. There is no distance, no softening of edges. Brain scans show unusual activity in areas linked to autobiographical memory and obsessive patterns of thought. But scientists still don't understand why her brain catalogues every mundane detail, while most minds actively filter, discard, and forget. Only about 60 people worldwide are known to have this condition, called hyperthymesia. To outsiders, it sounds like a gift. To Jill, it is often a weight. Memory is supposed to protect us, preserving what matters and releasing the rest. Her mind does the opposite, holding on to everything, unable to choose what deserves to stay. The mystery isn't how much she remembers. It's how anyone lives, without the relief of forgetting. 27. The vampire disease. Long before vampires were stories, there were people who feared the sun. Those with porphyria learned early that daylight could hurt them. Sunlight blistered their skin, leaving scars that healed slowly and imperfectly. Over time, gums receded, making teeth appear longer, sharper. Faces changed. Shadows became safer than light. In severe cases, the body developed an unusual hunger for heme, a component found in blood. It wasn't desire in the way myths describe, but a biological consequence of something missing. something the body could no longer make properly. Porphyria is caused by defects in heme production. When this process fails, toxic substances called porphyrins build up in the body, quietly damaging skin, nerves, and the mind itself. Some patients experience only mild symptoms. Others suffer intense pain, confusion, hallucinations, and psychiatric episodes that arrive without warning. This wide variation is one of the disease's greatest mysteries. Why does one person live almost normally, while another is consumed by sensitivity, neurological damage, and mental distress? Why does the same condition wear such different faces? Historians believe porphyria may have shaped old legends, stories of creatures who avoided the sun, bore scars, and lived on the edges of society. One of the most famous suspected cases was King George III, whose episodes of madness may have been severe porphyria attacks misunderstood by his time. The truth is quieter than the myth. No immortality, no transformation, just a body struggling to protect itself from light. And perhaps that's how legends begin, not with monsters, but with misunderstood suffering, remembered long after the science catches up. 28. The syndrome of smelling your own death. Some people become haunted by a smell no one else can sense. It follows them everywhere, in rooms, in conversations, in silence. They are convinced it comes from their own body, a foul, unbearable odor that others must surely notice, and yet no one does. This condition is known as olfactory reference syndrome. Those who experience it don't simply worry about hygiene. They know they smell bad. Showering becomes compulsive. Clothes are changed repeatedly. Social situations feel impossible. The fear isn't embarrassment, it's certainty. One man became convinced he smelled like rotting flesh. The belief was so powerful that he quit his job, withdrew from friends, and stopped seeing his family altogether. He lived in isolation, trying to protect others from something that wasn't there. Doctors tested him carefully. Chemical analysis showed nothing unusual. His body produced no abnormal odor at all. The smell existed only in his mind. Brain imaging suggests irregular activity in areas responsible for processing smell and self-perception. The senses, it seems, had turned inward, misinterpreting signals, amplifying absence into reality. But why the brain chooses this specific delusion remains unknown. Why a smell? Why decay? Why the unshakable belief that one's own presence is unbearable? For those who suffer from it, reassurance offers little relief. The mind insists on its version of reality, even when the world gently disagrees. Some fears aren't loud, they linger quietly, in the space between perception and truth. "29. The Elephant Man's True Disease. In Victorian England, his bones and skin grew in ways no one understood. His face became asymmetrical, his limbs enlarged unevenly. Thick folds of skin formed where none should have been. To the world around him, he was labelled the Elephant Man and displayed as a curiosity, seen but rarely understood. For more than a century, doctors believed they knew the cause. They called it neurofibromatosis, a condition known to produce tumours along nerves. The explanation settled in medical books and stayed there, unchallenged, until later. Modern analysis suggests something far rarer: Proteus syndrome, a disorder caused by a random genetic mutation that occurs after conception, affecting only some cells while leaving others untouched. It causes bones, skin, and tissues to grow uncontrollably, but unevenly, unpredictably. What deepens the mystery is this: most people with Proteus syndrome experience far milder changes, nothing close to the severity Merrick endured. Why did his condition progress so relentlessly? Why did his body never find balance? Some researchers now believe he may have carried two rare conditions at once: Proteus syndrome combined with neurofibromatosis, a combination so unlikely it borders on impossible. And yet, it may be the only explanation that fits. Without DNA testing, which has never been performed on his preserved remains, we may never know the truth. Joseph Merrick's life was defined by questions medicine couldn't yet answer. And even now, long after the crowds have gone quiet, his body still holds its secrets, unchanged and unresolved. 30. The sleeping sickness of the 1920s. After the world endured the devastation of the 1918 flu pandemic, another illness arrived without announcement. It was called encephalitis lethargica. Some people simply fell asleep, not for hours, but for weeks, months. They lay still, breathing, eyes sometimes open, trapped in a state between waking and dreaming. Others experienced the opposite, an inability to sleep at all, their minds locked in restless alertness. Many became what doctors later described as living statues. They were conscious, aware of the world around them, yet unable to move or speak. Their bodies refused to respond. Time passed, but they remained frozen within it. For some, the illness altered personality itself. Gentle people became impulsive or violent. Others developed compulsive behaviors or sudden changes in sexuality. Children were especially affected, developing uncontrollable tics, strange movements, and behaviors their families did not recognize. And then it stopped. Around 1927, the disease vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. No clear cause was ever identified, no virus isolated, no single explanation agreed upon. The epidemic simply faded, leaving behind thousands of survivors locked in silence. Decades later, neurologist Dr. Oliver Sacks administered a drug called L-Dopa to some of these patients. For a brief, astonishing period, they awakened, they spoke, they moved, they returned to themselves, only to slowly slip back again. The greatest mystery remains unanswered. Was the disease triggered by the flu pandemic? Was it an autoimmune reaction, the body attacking its own brain? Or was it something entirely different, something we no longer know how to recognize? It came quietly, it changed lives completely, and then it disappeared, as if it had only ever meant to visit for a moment. 31. The Blue People of Kentucky. In the hills of rural Kentucky, there lived a family unlike any other. For generations, the Fugate family was known for their blue skin, a deep indigo hue that set them apart and turned them into local legends. Neighbors whispered, children stared. Stories spread quietly through the mountains, passed down like folklore. For years, no one understood why they were blue. It wasn't until the 1960s that a hematologist finally uncovered the cause. The family carried a rare genetic condition called methemoglobinemia. Their blood contained an unusual form of hemoglobin, one that struggled to carry oxygen properly. Without enough oxygen reaching the skin, a blue tint slowly emerged. What made the story even more remarkable was how the gene took hold. A French orphan carrying the rare recessive trait settled in the isolated Kentucky hills and married a woman who, by astonishing coincidence, carried the same gene. Cut off from larger populations, their descendants married within the community, quietly concentrating the condition over time. And yet, despite their color, the Fugates were healthy. They worked. They raised families. They lived long, ordinary lives. The blue skin changed how they looked, but not how they lived. Modern medicine eventually found a way to reverse the color temporarily. A simple treatment using methylene blue could restore their skin to a more familiar tone. But some family members chose not to use it. They had lived their whole lives this way. Blue was not an illness to them. It was identity. Sometimes, what begins as a mystery becomes a story of adaptation, of how the body and the people within it find a way to belong exactly as they are. And in the quiet hills of Kentucky, the legend of the blue people still lingers, softly, like a memory that refuses to fade. 32. The laughing epidemic of Tanganyika. It began with laughter, not joy, not amusement, just laughter that wouldn't stop. In 1962, at a girls' boarding school in what was then Tanganyika, 3 students suddenly began laughing uncontrollably. There was no joke, no reason. At first, it seemed harmless, almost contagious in a playful way. But the laughter didn't fade. Within hours, dozens of students were laughing too. By the end of the day, 95 girls were affected. Some laughed until they cried. Others screamed, fainted, or collapsed from exhaustion. The laughter came in waves, lasting hours, sometimes days, returning without warning. Soon, it spread beyond the school. Nearby villages were affected, families, neighbors, entire communities. In total, more than 1,000 people experienced the same uncontrollable episodes. Schools shut down. Daily life paused. No one could explain what was happening. Doctors searched for a cause. There was no toxin, no infection, no physical illness. Those affected weren't pretending. They couldn't stop even when they wanted to, even when they were frightened, even when they were too tired to continue. The most widely accepted explanation is mass psychogenic illness, a stress response spreading silently through social connection. The region had been under immense pressure at the time. Political change, uncertainty, fear. The body, unable to speak that stress openly, found another outlet. But the mystery remains. Why laughter? Why not fear, or pain, or silence? And why did it move so easily through some communities, while others remained untouched? The laughter eventually faded as suddenly as it had begun, leaving behind only stories and the uneasy knowledge that sometimes emotion itself can travel without sound, without reason, and without permission. 33. The woman pregnant for 46 years. In 1955, Zara Abutalib went into labor. She felt the pain begin, steady and unmistakable. But something was wrong. The baby shifted into a position outside the womb, an ectopic pregnancy, and the pain became unbearable. At the hospital, Zara saw another woman die during childbirth. Terrified of surgery, she made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She went home. Days passed. The pain slowly faded. The pregnancy seemed to end on its own. Zara believed her body had somehow resolved what medicine could not, and life continued. Years turned into decades. The memory of that pregnancy softened, then quietly disappeared. She never knew the truth. More than 40 years later, persistent abdominal pain led doctors to perform an X-ray. What they found stunned everyone involved. Inside her abdomen was a fully formed fetus, encased in calcium, preserved, hardened, and silent. It was a lithopedion, a stone baby. The pregnancy had never left her body. Instead, when the fetus could not survive and could not be reabsorbed, Zara's immune system did something extraordinary. To protect her from infection, it slowly sealed the tissue in layers of calcium, isolating it completely. Over time, it turned to stone. For 46 years, her body lived in perfect balance with this presence. No infection, no fever, no warning. A foreign life carried quietly, just beneath awareness. She was 75 years old when surgeons finally removed it, one of the longest known ectopic pregnancies ever recorded in medical history. The greatest mystery isn't that it happened, it's how her body knew exactly what to do and kept that secret safe for nearly half a century. Sometimes survival doesn't look like healing. Sometimes it looks like patience. "34. The Stendhal syndrome. For some people, beauty is not gentle. It arrives all at once. Standing before a painting, a sculpture, a ceiling painted centuries ago, their breath shortens. The room begins to spin, hearts race, knees weaken. Some feel dizzy, others faint. A few experience panic, confusion, even brief hallucinations. This experience is known as Stendhal syndrome. It takes its name from the French writer who, in 1817, described being overwhelmed while walking through Florence. His senses flooded by art, history, and beauty until his body could no longer keep up. Since then, similar cases have been reported again and again, most often in Florence, Italy. Tourists collapse in museums. Visitors are escorted out of galleries in tears. Some suffer panic attacks or temporary breaks from reality while standing before famous masterpieces, artworks meant to inspire calm, reflection, and awe. Brain imaging offers only partial clues. In some people, beauty intensely activates the brain's pleasure and emotional centers. The response is powerful, almost intoxicating. But why this reaction spills over into physical symptoms remains unclear. Is Stendhal syndrome a genuine neurological event, or a psychological response shaped by expectation? Skeptics point out that it is reported mostly among tourists, people who arrive already primed to feel something profound. They argue that anticipation, cultural pressure, and emotional overload may push the mind beyond its limits. The mystery remains unresolved. Why does beauty lift some people while it overwhelms others? Perhaps the mind, like the body, has a threshold, and sometimes when beauty crosses it, the only response is to stop and feel everything at once. 35. The man whose heart was on the wrong side. For most of his life, no one noticed anything unusual. The man lived normally. He worked, laughed, grew older, never suspecting that inside his body, everything was reversed. It wasn't until decades later, during a routine medical exam, that doctors made the discovery. His heart was on the right, his liver on the left. Every organ arranged like a mirror image of the human body. The condition is called situs inversus totalis, and it affects roughly 1 in 10,000 people. Often, it comes with serious complications, especially heart defects that reveal themselves early in life. But not for him. His cardiovascular system worked flawlessly. Blood flowed where it should. Nerves fired correctly. Every connection, every vessel and pathway had somehow developed in perfect reverse, without error. This is where the mystery deepens. During early development, the body relies on subtle signals to determine left from right. Those signals had clearly been flipped, and yet everything still aligned. Every organ knew where it belonged, even when belonging meant being somewhere else. How did the body manage this? How did every structure wire itself correctly, despite following opposite instructions? Scientists believe this case points to something remarkable, that the human body has redundant systems, quiet backups that ensure function even when orientation is reversed. For him, left and right were simply suggestions, and the body, in its quiet intelligence, adjusted, creating balance, even in reverse. 36. The girl who cries crystal tears. When she cried, her tears did not fall. They formed. From the corners of a young Lebanese girl's eyes, tiny crystal-like shapes began to emerge, sharp, translucent fragments where liquid tears should have been. Each one caused pain, scratching gently as it surfaced, leaving doctors and family equally stunned. Medical tests confirmed the crystals were real. They contained calcium and trace minerals, the same elements found in normal tears. But in healthy eyes, those minerals remained dissolved, carried away in liquid. In her case, something had changed. The tears were turning solid. Doctors examined her tear ducts carefully. There were no injuries, no blockages, no visible cause. And yet, inside those narrow passages, minerals were somehow crystallizing before they could escape, assembling into fragile structures that had no known biological explanation. A few similar cases have appeared around the world, scattered across time and geography. Too rare to study, too isolated to compare. No clear pattern ever emerged. Some suggested an unusual chemical balance in her tears. Others wondered about environmental exposure or a metabolic process science has yet to identify. None of the theories fully explained how the body could quietly build crystals in a place meant only for fluid. For now, the mystery remains. Why did her tears choose shape over motion? Why did her body turn emotion into something solid? Some secrets don't dissolve easily. They form slowly, in silence, and wait to be understood. 37. The walking corpse of Haiti. In 1962, a man named Clairvius Narcisse was declared dead. Doctors in a Haitian hospital examined him. His breathing was gone. His pulse could not be found. His family mourned, and he was buried, lowered into the ground, sealed away, and remembered as lost. 18 years later, he returned. In 1980, Clairvius Narcisse walked back into his village and claimed something impossible. He said he had been buried alive, dug up in the night, and forced into years of labor as a zombie. According to his account, a local sorcerer had poisoned him with a substance that slowed his body so completely that death appeared certain. His heart barely moved. His breath faded beyond detection. To doctors, he was gone, but he was still aware. After his burial, Narcisse said he was exhumed and kept in a confused, obedient state, with repeated doses of hallucinogenic drugs. He worked fields without memory, without will, trapped in a body that functioned but could not resist. Only when his captor died and the drugs stopped did his awareness slowly return. Researchers later took his story seriously. They identified toxins found in pufferfish and certain plants that could, in theory, induce paralysis, suppress vital signs, and cause extreme dissociation. The chemistry seemed possible. The folklore suddenly felt less distant. But there was a problem. No one has ever successfully recreated the so-called zombie powder. No medical record fully confirms his burial, and no experiment has proven the process works as described. So the mystery remains. Was Clervius Narcissus truly buried alive? His body mistaken for death by science that didn't yet understand the toxin? Or was his story shaped by belief, memory, and cultural myth into something larger than truth? In Haiti, the line between chemistry and folklore has always been thin. And sometimes the most unsettling stories live exactly there, between what can be proven and what refuses to rest. 38. The persistent arousal without desire. For some people, the body refuses to be quiet. Without warning, without desire, sensations begin. Persistent, intrusive, impossible to ignore. The body responds as if aroused, even though the mind feels nothing of the sort. This condition is known as persistent genital arousal disorder, or PGAD. For one woman, it meant enduring hundreds of involuntary orgasms a day. They were not pleasurable. They were painful, exhausting, and deeply distressing. Ordinary movements, riding in a car, sitting in a chair, feeling a vibration through the floor, could trigger another episode. There was no relief. What most people associate with intimacy became, for her, a source of constant suffering. Sleep was difficult. Concentration disappeared. Anxiety and despair slowly followed. The body and mind were no longer speaking the same language. Doctors know that PGAD is not psychological in origin, though the emotional toll can be severe. In some cases, symptoms began after antidepressant use. In others, following pelvic surgery or nerve injury. And for some, there was no clear beginning at all. The nervous system seemed to be misfiring, sending signals without meaning, without permission. But the exact mechanism remains unclear. Why do certain nerves become locked in a loop of sensation? Why does the body generate responses without desire? And why does it happen to so few while remaining unknown to most? Treatments vary. Some help briefly, others not at all. There is no single cure, only management, patience, and hope that understanding will one day catch up. The greatest misconception is that this condition brings pleasure. It does not. It brings noise where there should be quiet, and sensation where there should be rest. And for those who live with it, the simple wish is not for more feeling, but for peace. If you enjoyed these stories and you're still awake, you can find more waiting for you here. New mysteries, quietly told, every week. You can subscribe if you'd like. Tap the like button if this helped you unwind, or simply come back another night. However you choose, thank you for listening. Sleep well.